Your water. You guys, this is our life. I'm not kidding. This is our life. Okay. You're going to step in that.
I know.
And then your sock is
My sock's
really
already
wet.
soaked.
Yeah.
It's already wet.
Oh, dear. Okay, get it together, man. I'm Amy, and I'm wife and mom and Pippi, because I don't like to be called grandma. I'm married to this guy right here. We've been married for 25 years.
An amazing man.
You are an amazing man, yes. We've been married for 25 years. We have 6 kids, 3 older boys biologically, and 3 younger girls that were birthed into our world through adoption. And I also serve at Eastview in the junior high ministry. Love junior hires. They're so much fun.
I'm Brad. I am husband and father to the same 6 kids, and pops to our 2 grandkids. I work in agriculture. I've been an elder the last 3 years at Eastview. I teach 2nd grade, which is my most cathartic hour of the week.
We met through mutual connections, mutual friends, but he didn't like me and really didn't want anything to do with me, and God really specifically told him that he was going to marry me, and he wrestled with the Lord, literally wrestled with the Lord. That's what you've said, right? Those are
That's
the
a
words
little
you-
dramatic.
Yes, but literally wrestled with the Lord, and then finally surrendered to his will. And it was one of those things when you hear, like when people say, oh, you'll just know, we really did just know. And so we met, and from that moment of, I think you're going to be my wife, or God's told me you're going to be my wife, to when we got married was 11 months. And now
Took you about a week to figure it out, though.
right. But I didn't wrestle with God. But now here we are 25 years later. So I think we thought when we had our 3 boys, we felt like life was very full and stressful and full, but life was good. They, at the point in our life when God began to press in on us about what we had perceived as our family being complete, the boys were all in school, and I was a stay-at-home mom, so I was cruising through life pretty happily and having lunch with friends and very comfortable. Everything was good. So why mess with that, right? Like, why mess with a good thing? But when we made the decision to kind of just stop at 3 boys, that was something that we didn't really pray about. We just felt like things were full, and so we made that decision on our own. We took that into our own hands. And when God began to really tug at our hearts a different direction, he was more willing, and I was more resistant to that, because I think I was much more comfortable with where we were. So we began to look into foster care first, right? And he made the call to find out information about how to become foster parents. And
Maybe I should tell this part of the story.
Maybe you should.
So we went to a family retreat for a week. Felt convicted about the decision that we made rashly to not have more kids, and really felt convicted. And so we came home Monday. I made a call to DCFS and had a packet of information sent to us. And on Friday, Amy received that packet and shoved it in a drawer so that I wouldn't see it. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, I did.
And what, it was about 6 months later? Probably 5 months later?
It wasn't that long. No, it was Well,
Yeah,
it
it
might
was.
it
It's
might have
5
been
months
about
later.
5 months later that I.
5 months later, we kept. I mean, we'd have conversation about it, but it was 5 months later, sometime in February, where you had it out with the Lord, right?
Actually, it was November. It was November, and I, God had just been, every single time I feel like that I was spending time with God, it was like adoption just kept coming into my mind, and I know He was putting it there, and so I just kept putting it off, and it didn't make sense. Why would we do that? Why would we head into foster care and things like that? So I just, one specific Sunday morning, I had a very frank conversation with God, an out loud conversation where I just said, okay, I'm done with this. I'm so tired of the constant conflict within my heart on this. I just want to know. So you just tell me, are we supposed to adopt? Are we not supposed to adopt? What do you want us to do? And that Sunday we were visiting a church that was having Adoption Sunday. So yes, that's when I fessed up and told my husband through tears that I had all of this information about becoming foster parents and all that that entails, and it was time that we started moving forward. So we did. And that looked really crazy for a while. We had an unwed mom that came to live with us for a season, and we ended up having a placement of a foster child that came to live with us. In both of those situations, I felt like, okay, this is going to be it. This is what God's wanting us to do. We thought we would adopt the child that this unwed mother was having, that was a boy. We could have we could have him like straight from the hospital. It would be an experience that would be familiar and comfortable to me and didn't seem as messy of a adoption situation to step into. But that wasn't God's plan. And our foster daughter was the joy and light of all of our lives, in particular my own, because I had no desire to be a mother to a little girl because I knew what I was like to raise, and to be a mother to a daughter just it wasn't something that I desired. And God gave us this placement of this precious, sweet little girl that awakened that desire in my heart. It was incredibly difficult when our foster daughter transitioned. She lived with us for 1.5 years, but transitioned back to her biological mother after that season. And we were really blindsided by that. Mm-hmm. We didn't anticipate that. We were told we would be able to adopt her, and then she was lifted from our home and placed back with her mother, and it was heart-wrenching. It felt like she died. All 3 of the boys were impacted by that transition of her being lifted from our home, and it showed up for each of them in individual ways in their adult years, as just different life circumstances really triggered that grief that wasn't dealt with and that trauma that just was underneath everything for them. So we saw that in one of our boys struggled with his weight and with food, and one of our boys we've walked through recently, his struggle with addiction, and it's a very difficult thing to walk through as an individual, but to walk through it as a parent, it feels so incredibly helpless. And also one of our sons has been navigating just overall mental health and wellness issues that have been, how do we talk about this? That's hard.
So yeah, I think on one of our sons that struggled with some mental health issues, I come from a a family background, right, where you just put a little more effort behind it and everything gets better, and you just bury emotion and you just deal with life because you have school or you have a job or you have relationships, you have responsibilities to take care of, and so there's not time for that. And by the way, it's not really real either, is it? And so when my son started to express the reality that he's struggling with mental health, I kind of admitted I don't know what to do with that. And the more we walked through that with him, the more real it was for me. And it's not a lack of effort. It's not a lack of desire on his part. It really is medically, debilitating. And there are ways that whether through counseling or through medicine and through spiritual means as well, that you can wrestle through that. And I think as a parent, it was just important. It was a good reality for me to come to, that he can't fix this by himself.
Yeah. I think with our 20-somethings, it's what I like to call them, my boys, my man children, each of them have had individual challenges in their adult years as they've gotten older. And I think that as parents, we just want to be with them. But what I've learned is that I can't make it better like I used to be able to for them. I can't do that. I have nothing within me as a mom to change their circumstance, to heal their mental health, to heal their addictions and free them from those things that hold them captive and in bondage. But if I can continue to guide them back to the one that's with them even more than myself and even greater than myself, yeah, we can be available, we can be with them and for them and love them through it. But God is so much greater and so much more for them and so much more with them than we can ever be. But to watch them go through those challenges and those struggles is really difficult when you love someone as much as your children, because you do feel incredibly powerless to know what to do. But that's where we continue to just turn back to God ourselves and know that in our weakness, He is strong and that He will be their help and their sustainer and the one that frees them. So
there's actually been 2 times where we felt like we had to have a conversation and kind of guide our son back to a better place. And we stopped ourselves and we prayed. Mm-hmm. And in both instances, within a day, our sons come to us and said, "Hey, I've got an idea," right? And God set me on this path. And so, as parents, the best warfare for us is to just battle mm-hmm. in prayer for them.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, God uses circumstances to transform us, right? He uses steps of obedience that bring joy and have consequence, so that ultimately we look a whole lot more like Christ mm-hmm. through it. And this journey from foster care to adoption, parenting, foster care to adoption, is like any aspect of life. It's not linear. God is not a linear God. He takes you from one place to another, and He reveals just enough for you to say yes. And
mm-hmm.
when you step into that,
yeah.
then you experience the joy that He has for you in it. But until you step forward,
yeah,
right, we didn't know what a girl would do for us,
right,
in Ari.
Right.
And it got even harder then when we realized we needed to make adoption permanent, or foster care, orphan care permanent, through our next step of bringing Libby home. Mm-hmm. He revealed just enough for us to know kind of what we were getting into, confirmed it in our hearts that she was our daughter, and we made that decision and we stepped forward into it. But it wasn't until we had her that we really experienced the joy of it.
And I think what I've seen and what I've learned is that almost 100% of the time, I want to say, it's not necessarily what I want. It's not necessarily what makes sense or what's comfortable. And also, it's not necessarily what people around you will affirm you in to move forward in. Or so when we started the process of adopting, we did that before our foster daughter had fully transitioned out of our home, which was God's grace, because it did, for my mama heart, it gave me something to look forward to. But at the same time, when God set Libby in front of us, she was not what I expected or what I wanted. Libby she is severely and profoundly handicapped. She's nonverbal. She doesn't walk. And when God asked us to say yes to her as our daughter, I felt like it was a life sentence for all of us. I felt like my life was over. I felt like my kids' lives were over. I felt like our marriage was over. I felt like he was asking us the greatest sacrifice, really. And in those moments when I felt like my life was ending, what I didn't know is that it was truly just beginning. And she was like the scariest yes I had ever made. But he made it so clear that that's what we were supposed to do. It didn't make sense. It was crazy scary. We had friends telling us, if you say no, it's okay. People will understand. You have your boys to think about, all of this stuff. But yet we knew it would be completely disobedient if we did not make her our own. God had made that so clear. So Libby was not an easy yes. Libby has not been easy since we've brought her home. She always has, it seems like, something going on physically, and she is like having, commitment-wise, she's like having a newborn, and we've had her now for 12
almost 11 years.
11 years, yeah. But yet, the joy in being her mom and her dad, and her brothers and sisters would say the same thing. We wouldn't trade it for the world. And all that God has taught us through her has been absolutely amazing. And to think that there would be so much that would be lost if she wasn't ours. And again, when our second daughter was presented to us through a referral, she was not what we expected. She was not what I desired personally to add to my family. But yet, what God had planned was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. And in the beginning, we said no to her. You would think that we would have learned, but we said no when we initially got her paperwork. She was older. Her medical condition was more complex than what we were looking to bring home. But again, we had this moment when we were on this long drive, and I had out the word in front of me, and I was looking to justify my no. I was just flipping through, and I was just looking for that scripture that I could claim, and I could just say, this is it. This is our no. This is why we're okay to say no to this child. And what did you say, Brad? What did you?
When I was hungry, you didn't feed me, right? Mm-hmm. When I was needing shelter, you didn't provide it for me.
Yeah, right.
Depart from me, I never knew you.
Yes.
No, I mean, God just made it really, really clear. In the absence of what we wanted, we had this open-handedness. We had this desire to be obedient. And, God actually likes to provide signs, too. And I think, you were looking for a sign for the no in the Word. Mm-hmm. And on this drive, we literally saw 3 signs as we're driving from Bloomington to Florida, that said New Hope or Hope City or whatever, and that was the name that we had already picked out. And so God said, in addition to that verse that came to mind.
Yeah, this looks different than what you were thinking, but this is what I have for you. So trust me in this. So we changed our no to a yes, and we added Hattie Hope to our family, and that was not easy in the beginning, and we fought hard to get to a place where we attached and bonded with her, and she became the sunshine of our life. And she seemed much like an only child, having 3 older brothers and a sister that was more like a newborn. And I began to ask Brad if we could consider another sibling for Hattie, and he very matter-of-factly said, no, we have not one penny to even be thinking about an adoption. Then one day we had a little video come in our email of a particular child that I'd inquired about, and I didn't watch it. Later that night we sat down for dinner, and he sat down and he watched the video of this little girl, and all I could see was out of the corner of my eye his face just drop into his hands, and he just started sobbing. And I looked over at him and was like, what is wrong with you? And he just looked at me and he's like, that's my daughter. Make the phone call tomorrow and figure out how we get her home. And each time with the girls, with our adoption process, every single time, God, beyond our expectation, always provided financially, always, just like in unbelievable ways. But it wasn't until we took the step of obedience that his provision came through. Like within the week of us saying yes to our last daughter, Maggie, that we adopted, within that very first week, someone called us and we had the funds for our home study. It was someone we didn't even know. And it was, literally, we had not a dime to put forward to an adoption. God said, you said yes, so now let me come in and provide.
So, the business that I work for was acquired about 18 months ago. And right after our business was acquired, my boss said to me, are you willing to relocate? And I said, well, I don't know what that means. And this company's based in Atlanta. And of course, my brother, who's my best friend in the world, lives in Atlanta. My mom and dad at the time had a house in Atlanta as well. And so I kind of jokingly said, the only place in the world that we'd ever relocate would be Atlanta. So yeah, we're open to that. And then I had to go home and tell Amy that I said that. So, over the course of the next 12 months, we had a lot of conversations, my boss and I. And in August, it started to become pretty real that this was going to be an opportunity offered to us. And, so we started to really wrestle through, what does that look like? And is this God? Is this Brad's career aspirations? Is this, is this just me? And, as we got closer and closer, I just had a really sense of peace that if God offers, if this opportunity comes, then this is certainly from the Lord. Mm-hmm. In October,
and I was on the same page with you with that for sure. Yeah.
And that's, I think that's actually a good comment. We had another opportunity 15 years ago where I had an offer to work for another company, and before I even went to the interview, Amy and I both just kind of looked at each other and said, if we're not 100% aligned on this, if we don't both feel called, we're not going to do it. I came home from the interview and I told Amy I was going to take the job. And she goes, I don't have a peace about this. Mm-hmm. And
I really didn't. And it wasn't, I think too, with peace, we can use that word peace so many times to like affirm if we're supposed to do something or not do something, but our emotions should not guide us at all. And this was beyond just not having a peaceful feeling. There was a definite knowing that the Holy Spirit I was not settled in the spirit within my spirit about him saying yes to this job. And there is a big difference with that.
Yeah. So this was, like I said, 15 years ago. And this was the first time where I said, I don't know that I like that. And I got in the car and I went for a drive. I mean, I just left the house because I was not in the same spot. And I didn't get a block and a half away. And God recounted in my memory, Brad, I told you, or you committed that if both of you aren't aligned to this, then this is God. And so I pulled into a driveway and backed up and went back home and, acknowledged Amy that, if you're not peaceful about this, then we're not going to do it. And, we found out, 4 months later, through circumstances, that if I would have taken that job, it would have been an absolute disaster. Because we knew some folks at the company. So we just learned when we make decisions, we have to be 100% aligned on it. And so as we walk into this opportunity in Atlanta, we both felt peaceful. Discipleship has really been a key part of my life, my ministry the last 2 or 3 years, and I really felt God calling me to be a missionary. This company, the parent company that bought us in Atlanta, is not a lot of Christians there, and so I felt really missional in this. We knew it was the right thing to do, so we said yes. And then all of a sudden, what happened? All the costs came, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The reality of what that meant.
Right. And I knew it wasn't what I wanted, and it's still not what I want. And I still pray the prayer that Jesus prayed in the garden: if there's any way, take this cup from me, because this isn't what I want to do, but I'm willing. If this is what you want, then this is what is best. And I don't want to be anywhere that you don't want me, because my goodness, again, I liken it so much to our experience with Libby, is that I know how scary and how hard she was and how much I didn't want her, but yet having her has been so great. I would never want to miss that. And so if he's asking me to do something that hard again, then I've got to believe that on the other side of it, it's going to be better. I have battled anxiety so much greater than I have with anything ever in my life. I've never had such a battle with anxiety. And I believe that it is a spiritual battle. It's an absolute spiritual battle, because the enemy knows that we will be used for God's glory on the other side of this. But it makes it so incredibly hard. It makes it hard for him to watch me deal with such anxiety that can be almost paralyzing at times. But yet, I know that I can take every single anxious thought and lay it at the feet of my Father, and know that he can take that and he can cover it with his peace like nothing else. So that's what I'm choosing to do right now. And I'm seeing the victory in it, in moments that are just he and I kind of moments, but I'm seeing the victory, and I know that on the other side of this, we'll continue to see those glimpses of what he has planned. But right now, we have to be willing, and we have to trust.
Yeah. That's funny. I was just thinking about that verse, actually, Psalm 40, verse 4. It's been, ever since our son started to struggle with mental health, I really have clung to Psalm 40, verse 4, which says, "Blessed is the man who makes the Lord his trust," which is different than blessed is a man who trusts in the Lord, right? But this idea of making the Lord our trust is an absolute transfer. All of our confidence being put on him. Mm-hmm. And so it's a really intentional decision that we have to make, and not just once and done. It's a daily and almost moment by moment.
Mm-hmm. And trust
transfer.
means Trust means you don't have everything in front of you. You don't know what's happening next. And you can't know what's happening next. But you still move forward. And that's something that we've always learned with him, is that, to obey doesn't mean to know the whole story. It just means that you just keep moving forward. In the midst of my anxiety and my challenges and struggles with all that I've been feeling, of this letting go of my life again, surrendering my life plan, and God had me divinely writing a lesson for junior high students on anxiety. And it struck me in such a profound way as I read these verses about how they connect. And really, I wrote in my Bible, like, anxiety buster. I mean, this is like the prescription for it. And it's in Philippians 4. It says, "Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for all he's done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your heart." So it will guard my emotion and my mind, the things that I think about. So when you think about what brings God's peace, it's when I bring everything in line with all of this criteria of what I think about. And I'm doing this, but I'm also praying, and I'm also giving thanks about everything. That is when the peace comes in. But it's my job to take all of those thoughts and align them with things that are true, with things that are worthy of praise, all of that. And I found it to be like a crazy good prescription for anxiety. So yeah, it really is what I've been clinging to over the last weeks and days. And
so, I think if there's one thing I would love people to take away from our story, I think one thing that God can be glorified through our story, as a young adult, I think I see this in our sons. They want so much to know what God has for them. What is God's plan for them? And so much of it's wrapped up in our desires for ourselves, our own preferences, our own aspirations. And you have to have heard from how we got married to the things we dealt with as we got into orphan care to this move, that ultimately what we want is usually not what God provides for us, nor what is best. And so again, another passage that I've really just clung to the last 2 years through all of the transition has been John 15, where Jesus really just lays out, abide in me, right? He just says over and over from verse 1 all the way through verse 11, abide in me. And starting in verse 10, he says, when you obey my commandments, you remain in my love, just as I obey my Father's commandments and remain in his love. So it starts with our obedience. By the way, it starts with me being in God's word to even hear that. And then he says in verse 11, I've told you these things so that you will be filled with my joy. Yes, your joy will overflow. And so, Jesus basically says, look, if what you're looking for in your future is to be happy, this is it, right? It's about joy. Joy is better than happiness. And obedience in what God's called you to do always results in joy that we could never manufacture on our own. Mm-hmm. And from Libby to now, as I experience the first couple months in Atlanta, mm-hmm. I'm experiencing the joy of that decision, and I'm seeing people that have not been able to talk about the Lord in the workplace, feel like the weight of the world's come off them when I just poke a little bit and find out that they read their Bible, and and I know that the Lord's going to use us there both in ways that we can't even predict.
But it's not about us. And I think, when you say, what is God's will for my life? That's when we turn it back to ourselves instead of just, what is God's will? God's will is that we live for his kingdom. And when we're obeying him, when we're in, walking according to his commands and we are abiding in him, then that is when we're living out his will. It's not about us. We always throw ourselves back into the equation.
Yeah.
And that throws off the scales when we're looking to make decisions and figure things out for life. Then we just forget about the greater purpose that is just living for his kingdom and for his glory.
Yeah, that open-handed walking forward, and then God just drops his purpose, his will into your life.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to look for it. He just
just drops it.
He does.
So